This is the Neurosurgery Podcast.
Hey JP, how you doing?
Hey, Dr. Wang, congratulations.
Yeah, it is really amazing. We have great news, and we have to thank our listeners because, at least as far as SoundCloud goes, and that's only one subset of accounting of data, we have just passed 1 million listens.
Yeah, so SoundCloud is where we host the episodes. That's where we upload them, and it pushes out to wherever you're listening to this, be it Apple Podcasts, be it Spotify. Now we're on YouTube if you're watching this. And as of yesterday, December 26th, 2025, we passed 1,000 listens per that accounting. Thank you to everyone who's helped make this
Oh,
possible.
1 million, 1 million
Did I say
listens.
1,000?
You said a
I'm going to
thousand,
past
1,000
1
times a
million.
thousand. Yeah, we're doing really well, and I want to thank our listeners because it's only possible because of our listeners, and we're getting, about something like close to 15,000 listens per month, which is pretty good considering when you think about the fact that we're not trying to broadcast to the world at large. We're really talking to the neurosurgery centric audience, and really, I think we send the request out every now and then. It comes back nicely from lots of our listeners about ideas and input and how we can better improve this podcast. Because really, it's just JP and me. This is not something where we have a lot of production. I mean, JP does the heavy lifting, but we're not really trying to monetize or do anything of that sort. We just enjoy having a conversation with friends.
Yeah, and what a perfect description for this entire show, a conversation with friends. And we're getting toward the end of the year, so we're about to do our little end of year wrap up episode like we always do. And so I've been thinking about that. And for me specifically, because we started this right when I finished medical school, the entire trajectory and time period of the neurosurgery podcast has been me moving to Chicago and starting residency. And so it's been kind of a whole coincident event that's been happening as I mature and the show matures, and our conversations that we have, the topics that we're discussing, the people we talk to, that's been tracking one to one with my years of progress through residency. And so thinking that 1 million times people have listened to you and I mouthing off about this or doing a deep dive into that, it's incredible. And so to echo what you said, Dr. Wang, you really can't put into words the kind of gratitude we feel for people who keep tuning in, the people who write to us with ideas, with suggestions. We hear from people who say, I'm the only person in my medical school interested in neurosurgery, and you guys give me a sense of community and give me a peek into the world. So we really, really appreciate all of you who have stuck with us for all of these years, and anyone who's just joining up and starting to listen and watch now.
Yeah, and like JP, I listen to lots of podcasts, and I want to ask JP what some of his favorites are. But before we get into that, I wanted to comment that we try not to have advertisements. We try not to have any kind of impediments to free flow of information. This is just a way that we can have like-minded folks speaking about topics of great importance to the community. So JP, with that, what are your favorite podcasts?
You know, it's a tough question because there's a few different genres you could say. I still listen to Rogan. I've been listening to him less in the past year. I think now it's become a show where if there's a particular guest I'm interested in, then I'll throw it on. And he runs so long that it'll maybe take days to get through one of his interviews, depending how busy I am. But I still listen to Rogan. I listen to the Rewatchables and other shows from Bill Simmons and the Ringer Network for movies. I love movies and anything discussing movies. I've been in the past year. I started listening to Trigonometry, which is Constantine Kissin and Francis. I don't remember his last name. That have very provoking conversations about current events, political issues of the day. I think they go out of their way to be controversial and kind of go out into those uncharted territories, and I appreciate their attempts to navigate that. Another show called Modern Wisdom with Chris Williams or Williamson, who, again, depending on who he has on, it's another one of those big think life hack kind of shows, and depending on who he has on, if the guest is interesting, I'll listen to that. And then some other ones where people things as simple as reading short stories, just audio fiction, that kind of stuff. What about you, Dr. Wang?
Yeah, I mean, I think on the manosphere side, like definitely try to keep up with Rogan and also try to keep up with Theo Vaughn, who I think is just hilarious
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. They tend to be a little bit off to the edge, but most of what I listen to now actually is more on the financial side. I
Hmm.
love Acquired. Acquired is a podcast that they only produce one episode a month. I think they're paid about a quarter million per episode. Two economists that really put a ton of effort into research on companies. Basically, they'll cover like Apple, they'll cover like Costco. That's one of my favorites. Acquired, you can learn a great deal. It's like getting an MBA listening to podcasts. I really like Iced Coffee Hour. My wife, Amy, introduced me to that. These two kids that interview entrepreneurs, really just kind of exciting stuff that they talk about. Those are like my favorites now. But one of the things that bugs me is I'm always trying to fast forward through the commercials,
Yeah.
and the commercials are louder, and I'm usually like in the middle of like getting cut off in traffic when this is happening. So we
Yep.
really try to avoid that. We want neurosurgeons and neurosurgery adjacent folks to be safe when they're driving and listening to us, to be uninterrupted, right? And the volume to be. I hope the volume's right out there, like that it's set properly. And please give us feedback because it really helps us build a better product here.
Yeah, and I will say, just to pinch off talking about other shows, and it's funny you mentioned advertisements. I won't advertise, but I will plug. Some of our good friends have a podcast called The Doctor's Lounge that I've been on, and almost every host of that show has been on this podcast as well. Anthony DiGiorgio, who's been on several times, Anish Koka, a cardiologist, has been on the show, Snot Dixit, Dan Choi, a private practice spine surgeon in New York, and Dutch Rojas, who's quickly becoming a serious non-physician force in the financial, business, economic, and entrepreneurial side of medicine. They do weekly podcasts now. It started kind of as a spaces that we would do each week on X, which I actually talked about last year at the end of year wrap show. And now they've started a podcast of their own called The Doctor's Lounge. I've been on it a couple times. I would encourage anyone who's interested in healthcare policy, regulation, economics, finance to give it a listen. These guys really know what they're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's really amazing to me because it's been organic growth. When you look back at the
Yeah.
past of this podcast, we started out as, a response to Dr. Death,
Right.
and we were partnered to some degree a little bit with the American Association of Neurological Surgeons, the AANS. Um, it was never official. Nothing was really hard in terms of what we had done, and we had some really amazing recordings first live. I think our initial recordings are some of our best. The,
Yeah.
JP and me together with our guests live. And then we entered the COVID phase very, very quickly after that. And then that was really when we really got our sea legs, right? We were recording a lot about COVID, about information about it. I remember we were recording a resident with COVID that was anonymous.
Yeah.
Really, really fascinating stuff for the times, probably a bit dated now. And then on to, I think, the next phase were the miniseries, right? We did a number of different miniseries. We had some celebrity guests on occasionally. And then I will tell you that I think that around 2020, late 2023, I kind of backed off a little bit as we came out of COVID. And JP, you were really carrying the weight for this podcast for about a year, I think. But now I feel like it's time to get charged up again. I mean, hitting a million's really got me energized. I think we should elevate our product a bit.
Well, you know I'm here for it, and we have done minimum one episode a week since November of 2019. Never faltered, and we never will. And if you're like the busiest, you individually are the five busiest people I've ever met. So I was by no means surprised or alarmed when after COVID ended and you could start going to meetings again. I had to do some solo episodes, so don't worry about that. But as you say, we've passed a million now, so it's time to double, triple, quadruple down and charge ahead into the next year, which we'll be discussing in a few days as we turn the page on the calendar again. I will say again to all of you who helped us get to a million listens and views now that we're on video, we, much like the advertising and stuff, we never really say this, but it would help us immensely if you could like and subscribe. So whatever you're listening to us on, if you're not subscribed, please do. If you've never taken the 3 seconds to click on the 5 stars and give us a rating, please do, because we've hit a milestone now for the show. And to the extent that these numbers and metrics, surgeons hate, the metrics, right? But to the extent that these things do matter, it would help us immensely. So if you're one of the people who have helped push us this far and get us to this milestone, please take, not if you're driving, but take a moment and click on the 5 stars, leave a nice comment if you have something nice to say, subscribe, tell your friends to do the same.
Well, JP, I first of all, that's very kind of you to say I'm very busy. We're all very busy. You're very busy. Every neurosurgeon out there is incredibly busy, and anybody who wants to be a neurosurgeon is busy. So I really think that we should consider, revisit like how we're doing this. Should we make the podcast a different length, a little longer form, a little shorter form? Should we use AI translation, right? Should we provide this service in Spanish, in Mandarin, right? In other languages that perhaps will help resonate in a larger sense around the world, right? Are there ways that we can leverage this so that we can be of better value? I think personally, and this will come out in our next episode, I have a feeling, I mean, it's just a gut feeling I've had for a long time, so maybe I'm just always like Chicken Little, the sky's falling. But I have a feeling that we're about to enter a very, very complicated phase in healthcare. Healthcare delivery, healthcare management, healthcare economics, healthcare legal components. And we touched on that with Brian Gantwarker about collective bargaining, which i.e. means unionization. And I think that this is the venue. This is going to be one of the important venues of communication as young surgeons have to more quickly adapt to the rapidly changing landscape. And I'll make some predictions on our next episode about how I think that's going to play out in the next 3 years. And this is not some apocalyptic sort of like, response to the current administration, but I think it is a catalyst for the speed of change.
Yeah, I look forward to some of those predictions and fleshing them out for you for our end of year episode. I will say, if anyone watching or listening has thoughts about a way that you think this show could distribute differently, or what kinds of things you think could be hosted in this space on this platform, we love hearing from you. Or if you just want to say hi, we love when people just say hi as well. But we've been saying it for 6 years. You know how to reach us, neurosurgerypodcast@gmail.com. You can also visit the website we launched this past year, neurosurgerypodcast.com. We have some pictures there. We have links to everything. And there's a little way that you can easily submit comments that reach us as well via email. We love hearing from you. This is so much a one-way communication with the audience. Obviously, we get to talk to guests, but for the vast majority of the people that engage with the show, it's one way. And so if you ever want us to hear you, we love getting messages, communication, criticism, praise, whatever you have, ideas. You can always reach us at the Gmail or through the website.
Well, one of the things I'd like to try, and JP, I don't know how exactly to do this technically because you're the tech wizard, right? But one thing Jordan Peterson and Michaela, his daughter, started doing, which, Jordan's a little bit controversial, but he's a major force in the world of podcasting nowadays, is like a call-in show. And I do think, I'd like to do that, but we'd have to set up a time because we don't want to contrive. We'd have to set up a time where people could actually just call in. And I don't know how we do that, but via internet, I'm sure there's a way they could pop in and then call in and we could just record them and they could ask us questions. Not that we're clinical psychologists or that we're going to, tell them how to solve the problems of their lives. But I think that one of the things about being a neurosurgeon is we have a lot of force and we have a lot of relevance, but sometimes we feel because we're few and far between as specialists that we don't have a lot of voice, right?
Yeah.
And you hear that over and over again, that we individually we have a lot of power, but as a group, like individual neurosurgeons don't necessarily feel like they're being heard, right?
Yeah, this is so funny. I think one day I'm going to have an AI go through the transcripts of all of our shows and rank the most common phrases that we say. And I think towards the top of the list will be, that's funny because we didn't plan this at all, or we didn't coordinate this at all. This is not scripted. But I've had the same thought about trying to do some kind of open forum where, we're having a conversation that's planned, but then people in the audience could chime in. I've done things like that on X with their Spaces function. And we actually, thank you again to our audience. We have a very large following on our X platform, almost 9,000 people, more than we have subscribers to the podcast. So that's something that we could easily, then of course, we'd have to get you involved with social media, Dr. Wang, but we could just do that with you through our podcast account. We wouldn't even have to make one for you. And so again, people listening or watching, if that's something you'd be interested in, to virtually attend a live podcast And there is potential, just like a Zoom call, people can raise their hand and you can turn on their microphones and they could chime in and ask a question and join the conversation. Um, this is something that obviously we're both thinking about trying, but for the people in the audience, let us know if you'd be interested in that. And if a bunch of people say, hell yeah, we would log into that, we'd love to get in the conversation, we'd be infinitely more likely to put in the time and the effort to set that up. So that's something that we can definitely make happen. I'm glad that you're having that thought as well. And for everyone watching and listening, if you would like to participate in something like that, please make some noise. Let us know.
Yeah, we've had some practice now, right? We've done 2 live recordings in an audience setting.
Yeah.
Just teaser on this that we are planning, and it's happening. That at a major national meeting, we're going to be recording live in person. And then I'd also like to see that happen in a virtual setting where people maybe call in from a foreign country, for example, that couldn't be in person with us. But we would have to set up a time. We'd have to set up. I would like it to be live and spontaneous. So we would set up a time where, and this is just a teaser in case you're thinking about it. I saw we have a big following in the Middle East, actually, that if
Yeah.
someone in, let's say, Abu Dhabi or in that type of setting would say, okay, yeah, they're going to be on. We're going to be doing this at you know 10 p.m. GMT, Greenwich Mean Time, and then they're going to buzz in and maybe even video. Right, video would be nice. Now the internet's so powerful, and we could talk candidly about things, unedited, unredacted, about what people face around the world. I think it would be very interesting. I think it would make us smarter.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, this is so often a one-way communication to the audience. I think that you and I, as the people doing the show, would be so enriched with the direct feedback of what people are thinking about what we're saying, what our guests are saying in real time, to give us some benefit in learning from them, as well as the conversations, the ideas, the people that we're able to bring to the audience through the show.
Yeah, as you say, this is not a CME event. This is intended to just be a conversation, and because of that, it offers us the most important element, which is freedom. Right, that we can speak freely, that we can talk about things that nobody else probably is really talking about in a public venue, at least as far as neurosurgery goes. Right.
Right, because if there's no CME and nobody's getting paid, then the worst thing you risk is, I guess, embarrassment. But
And we've
the
been
whole
embarrassed before. Yes, we have been
oh yeah,
embarrassed before.
right,
Yeah.
definitely. But the whole point of having conversations, sometimes it's just for fun, and sometimes you want to let people know that your friend wrote a new book or something. But oftentimes, when you're exploring ideas, the idea is to be wrong and to make mistakes, and that's how you learn and either find a new idea or correct your old ideas. And having the courage and willingness to do that publicly means that what would have been an individual experience of correcting an errant idea that you had instead can be shared to a vast audience who can all learn from your mistake all at once. And that's, I think, in the best case, if you achieve it, that's a public service.
So another thing I'd like to think about doing, and now I'm really kind of reaching for the stars a bit on this, but because you're coming from a family of lawyers, right? I have no lawyers in my family. I actually thought on our fifth year
Me
anniversary. Yeah, right. On our fifth year anniversary, I actually thought that given our origins, that you and I ought to make a trip and go have a conversation with Christopher Dunch.
I would. I would.
I mean, from everything I've heard about the people who knew him, is that it's a lot more complicated than you hear about in the Wondery podcast. And I'm not, look, believe me, I'm not an apologist for anything anybody does that's horrific. But on the other hand, I think that if it can help people learn about mistakes or corrective actions, I would be open to it, even though I know we would probably get a lot of controversial, maybe a little bit of blowback, but also maybe some learning.
I would absolutely be willing and even enthusiastic to do that. Again, in the worst case, I'm imagining this just off the cuff, but in the worst case, we go down and talk to him, and he's exactly the monster that some people would say and present him to be. But probably, as you say, there will be some lesson in there for someone who is at risk of making a mistake. Maybe not the same mistake that he made, but some similar mistake or at risk of falling astray, and just getting an insight into his experience. and what was going through his head and what's going through his head now, there's of course that could be of great benefit to people who are developing themselves as people and as professionals.
And I'll say this as I mean, we started this podcast as a response to the Doctor Death podcast and then the television miniseries. On the other hand, right, most neurosurgeons have been in scenarios that were they to be compartmentalized and multiplied over some short temporal span, been accused of being something like that, right? And I'm not saying it's the same thing. I am not saying it's the same thing. However, is it possible that the variance was just too great on this one individual? Was it possible that the educational element was not adequate? Was it possible that this really is, as you say, like someone on the margin of where they're truly sociopathic, right? And I don't know the answer to that question. I really don't know the answer to that question. But I will say that, you know, any neurosurgeon who has not been accused of doing like the wrong thing or being bad is probably not very busy. And I say that as not as an apologist, but as a way of identification and empathy with all my brothers and sisters out there who practice this fine art.
Yeah, well, what a fantastic and, as you say, potentially explosive idea for taking the show to the next level. It's something tells me that would greatly accelerate our march toward 2 million listens if we were able to have Dr. Dunst on the show as a guest.
Well, JP, it's been an amazing journey. We're just getting started, I think.
Oh yeah.
And it has really been one of the most rewarding and pleasurable parts of my life, facets of my life. So thank you very much. I look forward to doing the New Year's episode with you again. And thank you again to our listeners for paying attention. And please give us your input.
Amen. Thank you, Dr. Wang, for 6 great years. And most importantly, thank you to everyone watching and listening for making this possible.